In modern politics, it is not uncommon for pundits who are disillusioned with the moderate existing parties to use creative ways of masquerading more extreme takes to fit them within the nation's more marketable Overton window of political views. For instance, one might use a dog whistle in which political messaging employing coded language that appears to mean one thing to the general population but has a different or more specific resonance for a targeted group is used. Or, more innocently, a euphemism, which is an innocuous word or expression used in place of one that may be found offensive or suggests something unpleasant. So what about proxy politics? In the case of this strategy, one uses a popular goal or policy as a label to carry out a more nefarious agenda. While both euphemisms and dog whistles are similar to proxy politics, they differ in the way coercion is used. Euphemisms hide the truth behind better words, dog whistle politics hide the truth behind confusing code words, and proxy politics hide the truth behind proxies, or more acceptable politics. Here's a few examples. In an attempt to copy the popular wording of the previous president's war on poverty, Nixon decided to start his own war, this time on drugs instead of poverty. Unlike the war on poverty, this wasn't to actually improve the general welfare of America, but instead to push a much more sinister agenda. Nixon's assistant on domestic affairs, John L. Riddiman, describes this very well as he had this to say about the war on drugs. Quote, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." The Southern strategy used by influential politicians such as Richard Nixon was a tactic used to appeal to racist Southerners by taking a middle ground approach to civil rights issues. It would implicitly call pro-civil rights political action authoritarian or an expansion of the federal government by hiding behind wording like states' rights and forced busing. Republican Party strategist and ex-chairman of the Republican National Committee, Lee Atwater, explained this tactic in his own words, saying, "You start out in 1954 by saying, 'Nope.' By 1968, you can't say, 'Nope.' That hurts you, backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. You're getting so abstract now that you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is that blacks get hurt worse than whites. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than, 'Nope.'" The far right has historically used national emergencies as a way to usurp power and take advantage of a frightened populace. 9/11 was no exception. It legitimized the opinions of politicians who were pro-torture, such as Dick Cheney, and enabled them to support rash and hastily passed bills like the Patriot Act that passed 45 days after the attacks. This rhetoric around terrorism programmed the American populace to be heavily xenophobic of Middle Easterners, as evidenced by the 5 times increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes since 9/11. Racists and neo-fascists still use 9/11 as an excuse to treat these people poorly, and it's effective due to poor reporting on terrorism, which is arguably biased on mass shooters, painting non-whites as horrible criminals, criticizing all people of that ethnic group, while white shooters are seen as lone wolves or little angels that just happened to be corrupted. What is concerning is that due to this media, people are scared of Muslims, even though the data would show that you should be more scared of the far right since they've killed more than twice as many people as Islamists have. Additionally, many Muslims denounce terror done in the name of Islam, and I've yet to see the far right do the same for their violence. It's easier for the media to focus on Muslim terrorism over fascist terrorism due to the political climate put forth by 9/11 and the policies that preceded it. During the 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation was established as part of the New Deal. Its goal was to refinance home mortgages currently in default to prevent foreclosures. The program developed color-coded maps to decide who had good enough credit to be able to refinance their mortgages. The problem was, mostly African-American areas were marked as hazardous, which means they did not get to refinance. This racist practice was later known as redlining, and was enabled by suburb developers like William Levitt, who, in Clause 25 of his standard lease for Levitt houses, put that a home could not, quote, "be used or occupied occupied by any person other than members of the Caucasian race. The federal government also enabled these racist practices by calling for suitable restrictive covenants to avoid inharmonious racial or nationality groups in housing. This led to more business developments in white neighborhoods and modern school segregation, as schools are funded by property taxes and worse schools were in black neighborhoods since they had less home equity. What we need to understand as responsible participants within a democracy is that we exist in an age where you can no longer take people at their word. The political world isn't about what policy is most popular, it's about getting people to support a politician's destructive pipe dreams through coercion. As contempt for mainstream politics grows in an increasingly dystopian nation, we must be weary of the proverbial white moderate, as radicals before us have warned us of.